Hi guys, welcome to this session on Microsoft Excel. In this module, I'm going to look at if and statements, how to nest functions, what the difference between Vlookup and match and index is, and you can see which is the better option. A lot of people go for Vlookup, but actually match and index as a pair are now becoming more common. But first off, the first sheet I've got open is about if and the and function working together. So a quick recap of an if statement. So if I go equals if, open bracket, if I click on this cell here, is greater than 0, and then I want it to say good if it's true, comma, and I want it to say bad if it's false. So that's basically the if statement. You have a test, a true, a false. If I tick that, it should say good because it is greater than. Now the AND function, if I just have a look at that one in isolation, just comes back with true or false if it's in isolation. So if I click equals and it gives you multiple arguments, you've got options there to add different things. So if I click on that one again and say if that is greater than 0, comma, and that is greater than 0, if both of those are true, it will come back with true. Because that isn't greater than 0, it's coming back with false. Now the OR function, which is another one I'm going to show you in a second, works like this. So I type equals OR. So if that one is greater than 0, comma, or that one is greater than 0. Now when you use the OR function, either of these, if either of these are true, it's going to come back and say true. So that says true because that one is true, even though that one isn't. So if you use the AND function, all the arguments need to be true. If you use the OR function, only one of the arguments needs to be true. Now, in this example, in the yellow cell, I'm using the if statement with an AND. So basically, what is this saying? This is saying if E10 is less than 100 and E11 is less than 50, if both of those are true, say within range, otherwise say out of range. So the if statement starts at the beginning, and then you do the AND as your arguments. Instead of just a single argument, which you get on a basic if, you can have multiple arguments, but with the AND, they all need to be true. So in this one, it's saying within range, because both of these are true. So that is less than 100 and that is less than 50. If I change that to a number greater than 100, it now goes out of range. This pink cell is using the OR function. Remember, the OR function just needs one element to be true for it to do the true. So it says there if F10 is less than 100 and F11 is less than 50, so or F10 is less than 100 or F11 is less than 50. If either of those are true, it will do the true bit. So if I put that to 1, 2, 3, now they're both, neither of them are true, so it's coming out of range. Now in this example at the top, this is an invoice example. You can see there it says 60 days overdue. If I change this invoice date to today's date, so just do a key command control semicolon, today's date, it then comes back with not yet due. Now the reason these all change is because I've got formulas in here to show this moving. But that says not yet due. Now what I've done here is I've used the now function with the invoice date, and then if you come across to this one, it's saying the now function, the if and using the now function to create a set of brackets. Now remember, both elements have to be true. What does the now function do, you might be saying to yourself? I'll just show you. If I type that into a blank cell, equals now, that is just basically today's date and time. I could have used the today function, which would just be the date, but that is obviously the computer clock, so it's always moving forward. So if I click on this one, it says there if the invoice date if now minus the invoice date, so today's date minus that date is greater than 30, and today's date minus the invoice date is less than 60, say 30 days overdue. So that's not true at the moment, but if I change this, if I go back a month to the 5th, then it jumps forward. Now it is in that set of brackets, and then the next one is the same thing. Basically, if today's date minus the invoice date is greater than 60 and today's date minus the invoice date is less than 90, you want it to say 60 days overdue. So if I push this back one more month to the April, it's now 60 days overdue. And that's basically how that's working, using the if and to create yourself a set of time brackets using the now function. So that's the if and option. Now the other one I've got here is I've got two sheets, invoice, list of invoices. So I've got 5 invoices, and all 5 invoices have got a purchase order. And you've got a little count there, count the numbers, and then count the text. That's a count A function. So they both say 5 and the balance is 0. So on the front sheet, this says equals basically that total, POF2, POF2, and it says 0. This one, which says 2, is looking at this sheet, hours. So you've got hours clocked in and a total at the bottom, hours contracted, and there is a difference of 2 because this person, Paul Black, only clocked in for 35 hours instead of 37 hours contract. So there's a difference of 2. So the if and is looking at these two cells, and it says there check file, because it says if A10 is 0 and B10 is 0, if that's true, if both of them is 0, which means they're all balanced, you can close the file. Otherwise, check file. So this is saying check file because that says 2, because there is a discrepancy there. And that's another example of using if and. So 3 different examples there. Now the next one I want to quickly look at is nesting functions. So this is looking at 3 functions: the match function, the ISNA function, and then the if function, which we've just looked at anyhow. So first off, the match function. What that does, it looks down, in this example, it's looking down this list to match this number. So I've just changed these colors slightly. So the first one, if I change that to, can you see that? Yeah, I still see that. So it's looking at this dark blue cell and then looking for it in this list. If it is in this list, it returns the position it is in. If it is not in the list, it comes back with this, not applicable, NA. So this second one, it says there, it's looking for 1, 2, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2 is in this list, and it is in the second position of this list. 7 being number 1, second position. This one, 2, 3, 4, is in the 5th position of this list. Now let's have a look at the function. So it says there, match B3, so this is B3, this dark blue cell, with last week. So I've named these light blue cells last week. And remember, if you're going to name things with 2 words, you either put them together with capitals or you have an underscore. So it says there, match B3 with last week. And then there's a 0, which means exact match. So I'm just going to delete that off and type it in for you so you can see that. So it's equals match B3, looking at the value in B3, comma, and then I've called it last week. So just click on that, comma, and then it's got this little list there. So I want an exact match, so I'm going to put 0 and then close the bracket and click the tick, and it comes up with that. And now we'll just pull that down and you'll get the same answers that are already there. Now this next function, ISNA, is just going to return true or false. Basically, it's looking at the cell next to it and looking at it and saying, has it got NA in it, which it has. So this one is saying true, this one is saying false, because it's got a number in there. And that simply equals ISNA, open bracket, click on the cell you want to look at, close the bracket, click the tick, and it comes back with true. Yes, it does say NA. So if it says NA, it means the number is not in this list. Now the if statement is just looking at that. It's just looking at if that says true, it must be a new number because it's NA. NA means it's not there, so it must be a new number. So remember, an if statement, as I showed you already, has a test. There's a test. A comma, what to do if it's true, and then another comma, what to do if it's false. So that's all three functions individually. What you would then do is you just bring them all together and just have them like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that all together from the middle, show you how I would do this one. So I'm going to go equals match first, open the bracket, going to look at B3, comma, I'm looking down last week, just double click on that, comma, 0, I want an exact match, close that bracket, click the tick, so that gives you the match function, NA. Now I'm going to put the ISNA function around that, so ISNA, open bracket, does all that come back with NA, close the bracket. All of that match function, does it return NA? Tick, yes it does. So then the if statement around the outside of that, if all of that comes back with NA, or true, it'll come back with, comma, it must be a new number. Otherwise it's an old number. I'll put same, to make it the same as below. Close bracket, click the tick, new number. So really you would just have this column, these are there just to show you how it all breaks down separately. So that's the ISNA, match and if functions. Now the next one is the Vlookup and the match and index. So quickly looking at Vlookup. A Vlookup function works like this. So again, I'm using names. So I've highlighted this little table and I'm going to call it product code. Spell it right. Product code. Like that. I'm going to call this yellow cell input code. And that should be it for now. So I'll just delete this off. This is how this works. Now I have a drop down list there which gives me all these codes, and when I select these different things it should pick up the relevant information. So Vlookup equals Vlookup, open the bracket. So now it's asking for a lookup value. Normally you could put that as a cell reference, or you can put that as text with quotes around it, but because I've created this lookup list, which are basically the codes that's in this table, I can just click on that and it puts input code in there for me. Comma, now it wants the table. The table I've called product code. So product code is that one, which is this table. Comma, which column do I want to look at? So in a VLOOKUP you have an index column which has to be on the left hand side. This column that I'm in at the moment is a description column, so that is column 2 of this table. So column 1, column 2, column 3. So I put a number 2 there, then another comma, and then now it's asking me, do I want a true, approximate match or exact match, which is false. I know you can put a 0 for false, so I'm going to put 0, but you can click on that and just put false. Close that bracket, click the tick, and it comes up with whatever that is. Washer 3 mil. So if I go back up this list a bit to the top, it goes nuts. And I've got that conditional formatting on there to colour that up for you. Now because I've used names, I can just pull this across to costs, click on that and just change that column to 3, because I now want to look at column 3 like that, and that is looking at column 3. I need to put that into pounds, £1. If I didn't have names, I would be using cell references, and then I would have to $ and lock this cell, otherwise it'll just come across and it'll pull in the wrong information. If you're not familiar with names, I'll have a video on names that you can have a look at. As far as I'm concerned, once you get past the basic level of Excel, you should be naming most things. So that's how you do a basic VLOOKUP. Now the next one is something that's come to the fore in recent years, taking the place of VLOOKUPs really, is the match with the index function. Now, when you do a VLOOKUP or a HLOOKUP, you have to have the first column or first row as your reference point. So that's the first column, and there's the codes. Now with a match function, with the index function, you don't get that problem. So this has all been set up, guys, and I'll go through it in detail in a second. But basically, if I select an exercise type, so if I say weights for January, weights for January, it tells me I did 5 hours weights in January. So if I'll go for find weights there, so that's where it's basically pulling that information from there. Now, how this all works, if I show you basically how the index function works first off, if I've got it here, I think. Yeah. In fact, I'll do it from scratch. So you have a data set, and then you have reference points. So if I type equals index, what is my data? My data is all this pink area. I've actually called it data, so it's picked that up. Comma, then it needs numbers, a row number and a column number. So I've actually got the match function doing that for me, but I'll just click on these two cells there. I could put a number in there manually, but I want this to be a bit more dynamic than that. So I'm just putting those two numbers as my intersection points. Clicking the tick, and it comes up with 5. So 5 hours for that one. That's picking that cell up there. Now, to use the match function, I've done this. So I've said match month with months. Okay, so what have I called this? So this list of the months is called months. This cell with the month in it is called month. So if I select a month, like June, June is the sixth item in this list. So I'm just using the match function for my coordinates for the index function. So on this one, it's saying activity and exercise. So where I've got weights, that's called activity. So if I select sit-ups at the top, sit-ups is in position 1 of all of this. So if I select press-ups, it's in position 2. Remember, the match function just tells you what position an item is in the list. And if it comes back with NA, it means it's not in the list, which can't happen in this situation because I've got data validation set up. So I've actually selected that list. So the only items in this list are in the drop-down arrow. However, unless, well, people can type it, data validation will stop that happening. Now, to put them both together, what I've then done is I've just named these cells. Well, I am going to name these cells, sorry. I'll name that one green. Enter, and I'll name that one red. And then your index function is looking at data and now looking at green and red for its coordinates. So green is 6, red is 6. So if I change the June back to January, and I change running back to sit-ups, 1 and 1, it's coming back with 12, like that. And then all of it together, if you didn't do that, would look like that. So that's a bit more of an ugly function, or that's quite difficult to look at. But obviously that does work. But I like to have these index reference points showing so I can see that that is bringing back the right information and there's no cock-up going on there. So that's straightforward. So that's an example of the index and match function together. And that is different from the VLOOKUP because your reference points do not need to be on the left-hand side of the table. I don't need this. I could have this anywhere. So remember the VLOOKUP, you have to have this on the left-hand side. If I wanted to look at this information and bring back this information, and this was my reference point, I would have to change this column so it was in the left-hand column, which is a bit of a restricting thing and has been in the past, but I have actually done that in the past just to get the information I want. That was before I realized how good match and index was. Anyhow, guys, that's the end of this video. Hopefully you've enjoyed those examples, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you for your time.